Michael Benders, he's senior White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal. He's also the author of, frankly, We Did Win This Election, the inside story of how Trump lost, which will be available everywhere tomorrow. Michael, welcome to the show. You know, one of the things that struck me as I was going through the book was the darkness of a lot of it, that there are times in which the president of the United States is saying things that, if taken seriously by the people around him, would lead to some like breaking point in American democracy. And basically, luckily, enough people ignored him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what this book shows. One of the things this book shows is how close we got to that point repeatedly. And we know well the story of the chaos of this administration that's been told on this network, other networks, by my newspaper and others. I think what's different about this book is not the chaos, but how dangerous it was inside the West Wing for a lot of the people right around this president. A lot of these people told me for the first time that they feared for the safety of the country and the future of the country because they thought this president was dangerous for the nation.
I want to talk about the sort of back and forth that's documented in several places about the protests last summer and the desire to have troops be deployed, and the attempt to essentially strong arm Milley into okaying that, and then just to have American troops open fire on protesters as a thing the president told people to do. Like, what were those meetings like, and how do we end up dodging that?
Well, I think what was happening there was that the president was at a boiling point, that he was seeing his administration slip away out from underneath him. He had planned to spend 2020 running on a message of the economy. End sentence right there. And really at the beginning, the first couple of months, it's kind of hard to remember now, but that looked like a winning message. He had survived impeachment. He was thriving. He was at his high point in the polls. And the economy was red hot, and then the pandemic hit, and then these protests hit. Then George Floyd was killed, and the protests followed. And he took all of this very personally and was struggling to find a message to respond to all of it. And he lashed out. His response was to lash out at the people around him. And wanting a show of force. It was really falling back to a lot of his law and order message from 2016. And, it fell to the top general in the world's most powerful military to stop the president in a lot of these instances.
Yeah, tell me more about that. I mean, I get the sort of psychological drive here. But what you document in the book is an American president ordering a top general to deploy American troops against U.S. protesters and to shoot them. Like, that would just straight up be an atrocity and war crime if it were to be undertaken, or just a crime, right? I mean, that doesn't happen because everyone says, well, the guy's blowing his top and there's no legal authority. But that is an instruction that is given by the president, according to your reporting, to the top general of the United States.
That's correct. And there are multiple instances of this in the book. But what comes through, I think, for one of the first times is Mark Milley, General Milley, as really a fascinating character here. And he is he's Ivy League educated, who was rising in the ranks of the military under Obama, but he's also kind of a Boston sports guy, and knew how to mix it up with Trump. So he's able to work with both administrations, and we see him in multiple scenes in this book walking Trump, basically talking Trump down, right? Trying to explain to him that the National Guard is specifically trained as quasi law enforcement to handle public protests, among other things. And the difference with the military troops that he wanted to send into the major American cities, right, the 81st Airborne, these are 20 to 25-year-old men and women who are trained to kill and take land. It's an inherently dangerous situation to send those troops into what are mostly peaceful protests. I think one of the most resonating scenes in the book for me is in one of these meetings, and again, it's Trump in the Oval Office with Milley, a slew of defense officials, White House aides, and Trump is screaming about wanting to crack skulls and shoot protesters in the legs, and Milley stops him, points to a portrait of Abraham Lincoln over the president's shoulder, and said, "That guy had an insurrection, Mr. President. What we have is a protest."
Did you come away from the experience of reporting and writing this book? There's two ways to go through some of what we saw, right? There's the guard, he had a car that was careening all over the road, and the guardrails more or less kept it on the road. And the other is like, we got lucky. We kept playing essentially a version of Russian roulette with American democracy, and like it never came up with the wrong chamber. How do you take away your reporting from this book?
Well, I think a lot of people in the administration, I talked to dozens of administration officials, campaign aides, friends of Trump, and they all had versions of how they were, not all, I'm sorry, a lot of them had versions of how they were the ones who were truth tellers to Trump. But when you report these right, but it's all, and there's a kernel of truth in there, but it's hard for people in any administration, before Trump and after Trump, to speak truth to power, right? I mean, to be that close to the most powerful political person in the world, it's a tough thing to tell that person they're wrong, right? And they all tried different versions of it, and the problem was time and again that they saw themselves as these as truth tellers, but what they really ended up being were kind of speed bumps, and they could slow Trump down here and there, but Trump used their answers and heard what he wanted as well. So when Mike Pence tells him in the run-up to January 6th that he doesn't think that he has the legal authority to overturn the election results, but he'll look at whatever legal analysis the president gives him, the president hears the second part. And when I talked to the president about that, he told me that Pence never told him no.
Yeah. Again, the speed bump metaphor, I think, is useful because the car is still in motion, which is precisely what is disquieting. Michael Bender, whose book, Frankly, We Did Win This Election, comes out tomorrow. You can get it wherever books are sold. Thank you so much, Michael.